what is it, 78 or 79 again?
78.
78.2. Here we are, part 2. We've just wrapped with Cynthia McKinney. I think that was a really good conversation. I think we should figure out where we can put it out publicly and do that, just because she does so few shows these days.
I agree. For the
like,
public for that one.
Yeah, and I liked kind of moving her into a new territory of sort of discussion for going forward, because I just don't like, I think there's no, like, I was serious. When I read her Wikipedia this morning, I was surprised that to me, it was a glowing Wikipedia, right? Like, if all you can say about someone is that she's an anti-Semite and a conspiracy theorist, and once she like pushed somebody or something like that, but everything else that's in there, like the granular detail it went into about every controversial thing she ever did, and when they described what she actually did, there's no reasonable person that wouldn't look at that and go, well, yeah, even if I disagree with her, that is the question you're supposed to ask in that position. They actually make her look really good, right?
Well, that's the point, is that, so reasonable person, I'm assuming you're referring to people who still have critical thinking skills, because I think it speaks to the sloppiness of Wikipedia. Just stamp anti-Semite,
right,
and conspiracy theorists. And these days that is enough, unfortunately, to turn most people away.
What was interesting is that's what it starts with. She's a politician, an academic, and a conspiracy theorist. So right there, 90% of the people will drop off. But if you start reading, they don't, not even until close to the very end do they even discuss any of the things that are accusations against her. So there's all this stuff that is like, well, write about that, write about that, write about that, and that, right? Like there was things in there that I didn't even know about her that I'm like, that makes her sound really good. So when you get to the place that like a person who has been, when I say right about everything, I don't mean that she's all knowing and never got anything wrong, but person who stood and asked the right questions on the right angle of the issues through her entire career, right, is like over there in Bangladesh, right, that like not even part of this discussion of solutions anymore. The system is dead. And so for her to continue to, like, I would love for us to be the inspiration of pushing her into a conversation that just doesn't even include the government, right? Kind of thing, because that is just is not a solution, right? So I like that
I feel like she seems to be moving there.
She's there.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Right. So
I also wonder if they'll change her Wikipedia after this show comes out, because we're, like,
her Wikipedia was updated today. Her Wikipedia was updated today. So for someone who's such a non-factor, why are they still updating her Wikipedia page?
Because they saw you looking up her Wikipedia page.
Right. So I do want to say this, and then I want to chat about a few of the things that we talked about with her, and kind of just, dig a little deeper and talk about some of that stuff. But she did bring up an operation. I have like a weird story that maybe I'll tell that I didn't want to tell when she was on, because it just may have pushed her into territory that was way too far away. But like, remember we talked last time about, does politics ever come up in your in the psychedelic experiences? And we decided that like, no, the mushrooms are very apolitical, but sometimes the characters come up and you have different thoughts about them or whatever, but it's never like vote for Joe Biden or whatever it is, right? She did come up in a psychedelic experience for me one time that like I've always been trying to sort of understand what the deeper meaning of was. So maybe I'll tell you about that.
Well, I will say I put out a podcast yesterday that speaks directly to this. Mm-hmm. I think so many psychonauts would be wise to start to incorporate into our psychedelic visions of like, our psychedelic journeys are still processed through our mind, our filters, our meaning-making mechanisms, our particular, neurological shape. So if we bring something into a psychedelic experience, like if I bring in an inquiry, then I'm very likely to have that reflected back to me. But so many psychonauts think like, oh, it's the mushrooms. Right. And no, it's our biases, it's our obsessions, it's our looping, all of those things.
Yeah, right. It's just our kaleidoscope. The mushrooms provide the kaleidoscope. But when people like, there's this idea out there that like the intelligence of the mushrooms will guide you towards a political solution, and that's just not how they work. They're just a mirror. They're like, look at you, right? Look at all the views, right?
Right.
Okay, so she did mention this Operation Fruhmenschen, which I'm going to tell you guys, this is the first time I have ever had a guest mention some sort of operation or mind control program or anything that I had never at least heard the term before. And it's interesting that it's a German name, right? Because of the Nazi, whatever. Okay.
Right.
So this is an article from LaRouche Pub, right? LaRouche Pack, which there's sets of issues with them as well, but they are very good at analyzing history. So basically here on August 2nd, so this was from August 2nd of, I guess, 2010, this article. So on January 27th, 1988, Representative Mervyn Dimally from California, the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, entered an affidavit into the congressional record from an Atlanta attorney and FBI informant named Hirsch Friedman. Friedman provided an eyewitness account of a secret and illegal 40-year ongoing FBI program known within the Bureau as Operation Fruhmenschen, which means Operation Primitive Man. That's fucking disgusting.
So disgusting.
Friedman described Fruhmenschen in graphic terms. The purpose of this policy was the routine investigation without probable cause of prominent elected and appointed Black officials in major metropolitan areas throughout the United States. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover and other top Bureau officials, Friedman explained, believed that African Americans were incapable of serving in high public office and took it upon themselves to railroad countless African Americans from elected office through trumped up charges and worse. Several authors have subsequently linked the FBI to the Martin Luther King assassination and tied that murder to Fruhmenschen as well. Mm-hmm. As a result of Dimally's initial efforts and a campaign waged throughout the 1990s by the Schiller Institute and a broad spectrum of civil rights activists and other close allies of Lyndon LaRouche, Operation Fruhmenschen was widely exposed. Just so you know, I don't know how much you know about Lyndon LaRouche, but he was also a person who was running for president and was put in jail.
What year?
It was like I can't remember if it was in the 80s or the 90s.
And what was he put in jail for?
We'll look him up next. I don't want to get distracted, but we'll go to him next, right? Yep. But now Fruhmenschen has been revived with the full complicity of President Barack Obama and the Chicago crew at the White House. A senior U.S. intelligence source has confirmed crucial details of EIR's own investigation into a marriage of convenience between the FBI and the Obama White House. A select list of African-American legislators who have been critical of key Obama policies have been targeted for destruction. And in return, the Obama administration has given the FBI the green light to expand its illegal surveillance programs targeted at American citizens. It is the worst of Chicago politics, wedded to the worst FBI abuses of power, right? And so then there's something here about Nancy. I don't want to read the whole article.
No, wait, but I do want to see what Pelosi's relationship is to this. Obama just keeps getting suckier and suckier.
Right.
So gross. Psychopath.
I have some interesting things to say about Barack and Michelle Obama on the dump on Friday with Jeff that most people missed, right? They were somewhere this week that most people missed, and I think it was a foreshadow of what's coming.
Wait! You can't tease that shit and not give us a little bit.
So they made a surprise appearance at the opening night of the U.S. Open, and Michelle Obama did the introduction speech of Billie Jean King for the 50-year anniversary of equal pay at the U.S. Open for women. And there was enough like little phrases and keys and codes within the speech, right, that let me know that this is like they're trial ballooning her as the candidate. Right. There were all kinds of little hints. I'm going to go do a deep recap of it with Jeff on Friday. Cool. But yeah, but think about the craziness of Barack Obama and Michelle Obama sitting there. They do that. And then they sit there and they root and applaud for Novak Djokovic, right? Who just a short while ago was enemy number one. How quickly, right? Like it's fat. It was just such a spectacle to see, right?
I mean, the audacity would be offensive if the American public wasn't so stupid as to not call all these people out on their revisionist histories that happen within moments of the things we're being programmed to forget or forgive or whatever.
Correct. Yes. Okay. So one of President Obama's key allies in this assault on political leadership of the African-American community is Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. The day she was sworn in as Speaker in January 2007, Pelosi vowed to clean the swamp of congressional corruption and proposed the creation of an independent Office of Congressional Ethics. The proposal was so flagrantly unconstitutional on its face that several leading congressional Democrats assailed it publicly, including John Dingell and Neil Abercrombie. Abercrombie charged that any referral from the OCE to the House Ethics Committee. Okay, so there's already a House Ethics Committee, and she wanted to create an unelected office above that. That sounds like Nancy Pelosi.
Pretty much.
Be tantamount to a guilty verdict. Any other conclusion by the House Ethics Committee would be seen as a cover-up. He raised the crucial question of the source of the complaints to the OCE that would trigger its investigations. I can't figure out where the ethics complaints come from. Are they dropped off at the door? LaRouche was even more blunt. In a July 30 statement, LaRouche declared the OCE is not an elected body and it does not have the powers of government. It is totally unconstitutional, it is rotten, and it should be uprooted. The behavior of this thing and the way it functions is contrary to the intention of the Constitution. And so, if it passes an unconstitutional ruling, that should be recognized as unconstitutional.
Oh, it sounds like every other body that we're answering to right now and have been since the stupid Patriot Act was put in place.
Yeah, right. You know, I meant to bring it up as part of my trying to tie everything together kind of thing. But one thing that found that, you know, when you hear people arguing over whether we're still living in the organic United States or we're living in the corporation, they'll say that the Constitution, the original Constitution was called a Constitution for the United States, right? And now it's called the Constitution of the United States of America or something like that, right? So a Constitution for, when you say something that's the Constitution for something, it separates yourself from it. So the founding fathers created a Constitution for the United States, not of it, right? Like, so when I was talking about how creating a system to get the people wrapped up in, right there in that name, all the patriots fight for, they want the original organic Constitution for the United States. That was the bubble that was created that had all of this other stuff has happened inside of it. They're outside of that. They're separate from it.
How does that relate to of the people, by the people? Shouldn't it be for the people? But do you know what I'm saying? Like
right.
That distinction between of and for.
The government is of, by, and for the people, right? Mm-hmm. But the Constitution is for them. So they created the rules. Someone else, someone from outside, all of them mostly being from Britain, created rules for the people here. And then they said, but we're going to let you govern it. We're going to let you choose.
Right.
Right. So it wasn't them. It wasn't the people who were here who organically stood up and said that we need a constitution. It was these people who left Britain, came here, and decided that they wanted a different set of rules for this place. Constitution for the United States. Mm-hmm. Right. So that just, to me, that's that separation of like, let's create a container to put all the people in, and then they can argue about that. And that argument will be the evidence that they're free to choose how it's run. Right. But the container was created by us.
Who's the Postmaster General who does that very specific, like
David Wynn Miller, the parse syntax grammar, right? So
I'd be curious to know what his definitions are of this of and for and the distinctions between them. Because I know his system has a different dimensional level.
I mean, he's the guy who claims to be 96 years old and 158th degree Freemason and all this kind of stuff. And he talks a lot about some of this kind of stuff. I don't know that there's like any system that anyone's come up with that is a solution to any of this. I think the disengagement is the only solution, right? But yes, I think that there's probably many layers within this. My guess would be that there's many United Stateses and many different, like, so if you, it's kind of like when you have an apartment building, you have many apartments within it. Within those apartments, you have rooms. Within those rooms, there are closets, right? And there's all these little sub-containers with like Russian nesting dolls, right? Yeah. And I think what he describes is sort of the barriers between all the different layers that you're in and how you know which layer you're in when you're arguing about something. I don't know that he's like found a solution to freedom. Like my guess would be is that once somebody finds the solution, they're not talking about it anymore because they don't care. It's like, oh, I don't have to do any of this. Bye. Right. Like if you're still here talking about it on some level, you're still in the encasement.
I mean, you and I are still in the encasement. I feel like disengagement is only going to work when we're sharing time-space coordinates.
Right. Well, I mean, I think this is, I mean, this is my, I want way more real world engagement and
Right.
way less of this engagement. And then also, you know, I think that but coordinates are super important. I mean, I really think that this is, coordinates are not just about like location, right? If you watch Fringe, right, that's how they move forward and backward in time and in between universes and stuff. Like they have this really interesting coordinate system that basically allows them to evade time, right?
I'm gonna need you to crack that and share it with cohorts.
So I think that there's soft spots in the temporal bubble, just like there are soft spots in, you know, if you like, where it's like quicksand, right? There's areas that are easier, or there's conditions that create the ability to perforate and move outside of it. Right?
This is why I want you to come to New Mexico, because I feel like there are a bunch here and your spidey sense is gonna adeptly hone in on them.
Hold on, I want to show you something because it's such a silly thing, but I think it's a great, let me go to YouTube and see if I can find this clip from Fringe that you'll kind of like. Let's see, YouTube, Fringe, scientist explains the observers. See if I can find the one. Yeah, it's perfect. It came right up. Let's watch this.
Have you heard about this?
All right, let's share the screen and the sound and optimize for the video clip. And here we go.
Samsung flip phone.
Once you see it, you must have it. There's no way.
Yeah, these things have been blowing my mind for a while now. Do you see the little half circle with wings? That appears on a cuneiform tablet at the Iraqi National Museum. It's one of mankind's earliest attempts at writing. And do you see this little triangular curlicue thingy? That's etched on the Iron Pillar of Delhi, 900 BC. It's pretty weird, right? So Nina Sharp says you're FBI too. You don't look FBI.
So you have no idea what any of them mean?
What the symbols mean?
Yeah.
No, I have no idea. But I found something else. We all remember Paul Revere's ride, one if by land, two if by sea. But before that, he was famous for his engraving of the Boston Massacre, 1770. Oh, come on.
Just so you know, since you haven't watched any Fringe and you haven't been privy to...
I watched 20 minutes of the pilot episode, maybe 10.
Okay, so what he was looking at on that piece of paper, the observers write in like this language that looks similar to like cuneiform or like certain kind of Korean language, or what the Danny Goler guy told me, like the DMT code that he sees between the laser and the wall looks like. So they write in that, and then there are these bald human looking people who seem to show like they're starting to have all these sightings of them in current time, right? They're bald and they look kind of like halfway to grays or something like that, right? And so he's explaining that, oh, look, they've shown up at important times throughout history too. They're not just here now.
Could be anybody.
Marie Antoinette, 1793. Sarajevo, 1914, minutes before Archduke Franz Ferdinand was shot, kicking off World War I.
So they've been around forever.
Or else they're not limited by our human perception of time. Are you with me? We think of time as linear, right? Life is a journey. You're born, and then you die. And to get from one end to the other, there's only one way through. Unless you look at it like this, and then you can see at any point. It's all happening at once.
So they're traveling through time.
No, it's more like they're observing time. I think these guys show up at important moments. Historical, technological, scientific, but it's rare. Maybe 24 different definite occurrences in the past 5,000 years of human history. But recently, I've charted 26 sightings in the past 3 months alone. It kind of makes you wonder.
Why now?
And what's about to happen?
Right? So the idea being that they're using coordinates that are different than, right? Like there seems to be some sort of energetic uprise in this system that they're observing, right? And then they go look at it, and the people that are inside the thing they're observing are thinking that it's in a specific location in space and a specific location or time, right? But for them, it's just like having a hot spot on a brain scan that they're going to, right? So I think I think it isn't just, so when you say that we need to make it about coordinates instead of this, it isn't just, yes, let's spend time together, not on the box. It's like, let's spend time in specific places at specific times where we know something specific has happened or may be happening. And maybe there's like a really interesting collective way that we can douse what those are, and we can become the observers, right? To a certain extent, we can figure out, there's, other videos that we've watched where you can see what happens in the head of an observer, that they're calculating all these coordinates, like what they see when they look forward. They see the same thing in front of us that we see, but they also see a grid on it that has all of these markings and all this kind of stuff, and certain areas are like lighting up, and what it looks like is areas where there's a certain kind of like hole about to be in a membrane, like you can go through there now or something. And I don't know if they're doing something to make that happen, or if they feel that that's happening and then they go there, or whatever it is, right? We were looking at some of that sort of earlier, but I think there's sort of a lot to that, right? Okay, so how did we get there? Oh, Operation Fruhmenschen. Operation Fruhmenschen. So let's go back to.
So once again, Obama sells out more humans / allegedly his own. I don't even think he's human.
Well, there's certainly like, I don't know. I mean, you remember, when there was endless daily new conspiracies about Obama, right? Some of them were that he wasn't even a Black person, that he's actually like Indonesian and, white, right? And that he just looks Black enough that, that kind of, to me, like all of the conspiracies about him being a Marxist or him being a communist, that was just chicken feed to get the right wingers to pay attention to that and to fight over that and where he was born and whatever. When I look at Barack Obama, I always feel Nazi. I always feel like German Fourth Reich, that kind of something or other. So the idea that this Fruhmenschen thing is an operation that he would be the heir of, sort of taking it to the next level, like that feels right to me more than any of the nonsense birth certificate shit.
Did we see in this document like the inciting incident wherein he brought this back? It's so interesting how like with Smith modernization and how he likes these like antiquated things and then like bringing them into our current reality.
Okay, so let's take a look at the next part of it, because I think it's going to get there. Right? Okay. All right. So, in the face of strong protest, Pelosi narrowly rammed through a House resolution creating the Office of Congressional Ethics on March 11th. Oh, that's interesting. What else happened on March 11th? COVID lockdowns, March 11th, 2020. That was the day that we went into lockdown. March 11th.
So 12 years later.
Okay. March 11th, 2008. On July 24th, 2008, Pelosi and House Minority Leader John Boehner announced the appointment of 6 OCE board members and 2 alternates. The chair and co-chair of the body named by Pelosi and Boehner were 2 former congressmen, David Skaggs, a Colorado Democrat, and Porter Goss, a Florida Republican, who later briefly served under President George W. Bush as the director of the Central Intelligence Agency.
That's no.
Who later briefly wait a second, this was after George W. Bush. This doesn't make any sense. A Florida Republican who later briefly served under, I don't know, that doesn't make any sense. The staff director and general counsel to the OCE, Leo Wise, came to the office from the Department of Justice, where he was a prosecutor in the criminal division and received a special service award from the FBI. The Office of Congressional Ethics held its first full session in January 2009 as Barack Obama was being inaugurated as the 44th president of the United States, targeting Rangel and Waters. So I remember when these things were going on. The Charlie Rangel thing. Dingell and Abercrombie's warnings were prophetic. In its short existence, the OCE had zeroed in on a number of leaders of the Black Congressional Caucus who have all crossed swords with Pelosi and Obama. At one point earlier this year, all 8 of the ongoing OCE investigations were aimed at members of the Black Caucus, a flagrant case of selective prosecution. While the OCE does not have the power to take action against members of Congress, its referrals to the House Ethics Committee and the leaking of details of those referrals to major news outlets amount to a Star Chamber proceeding. So this was the original thing, like what they're doing to Donald Trump now is rooted in this. It's the same thing.
Yep.
And and it's interesting that like it's happening under Joe Biden, who like has been the worst person for Black people, but appeals to Black people to elect him. Like if you're not Black, you don't vote. If you don't vote for me, you're not Black. Remember when he said that? When he
but it's the same as Hillary with her hot sauce. The Democrats have to pander to the Blacks who know that they're
right. Okay. While the OCE does not have the power to take, and according to a senior U.S. intelligence official, the OCE has been fed FBI dossiers on a hit list of congressmen, predominantly African-American, including material illegally obtained through unauthorized surveillance and unwarranted sting operations. The source pointed to the case of former Representative William Jennings Jefferson as a crucial event in the revival of Fruhmenschen. A 9-term Congressman, Jefferson was the first African-American elected to the U.S. Congress from Louisiana since the end of Reconstruction. In May 2006, the FBI raided his congressional office, and in what some constitutional scholars called one of the most flagrant violations of the separation of powers in American history, Jefferson was indicted on June 4th, 2007, and following his defeat in the 2008 general election, he was prosecuted, convicted, and sentenced to 13 years in federal prison on bribery charges. The Jefferson case was the green light for the FBI to fully revive Fruhmenschen, and the Obama administration, contrary to the expectations of millions of voters, has done nothing to halt the FBI's latest assault on African-American political leadership, the source charged. On August 2nd, the OCE aimed its guns at longtime California Democrat Republican Maxine Waters in an attempted political lynching based on a bogus charge of conflict of interest in which bankers by Representative Barney Frank is a primary witness against her. Like Rangel, Waters is refusing to capitulate to the Ethics Committee, stating, "I have not violated any House rules. Therefore, I simply will not be forced to admit to something I did not do, and instead have chosen to respond to charges made by the House Committee on standards of official conduct in a public hearing." Okay, so this is interesting, right? Think about what a clown show Maxine Waters is now. Like, what if this was the thing that turned her into the clown show?
Probably.
Right? Like, you know, it never really looks good for her. It always looks like she was living high and mighty while the people in her district lived below. But it's gotten to this cartoonish proportion, right? In the last 10 or 15 years. Okay.
Well, it struck me as when Cynthia was saying that most people like do something unethical or betray their family and then are compromised. It has me wondering, like, are we too integrity deficient as a species at our current level of evolution to handle a real democracy, given that everyone does something to put themselves, you know, in the stranglehold of the evil puppeteers? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you and I don't operate like that, but given how consistent it is with these people, it just has me consistently questioning, like, what is our species and how fucked up are we?
Right. I mean, you know, so again, I don't think democracy is something desirable at this point, but if it were what they say it was, then maybe that would be, right? Okay. Right. So, right. I think that they're very concerned with things that have very little to do with the politics at hand. Like, there doesn't seem to be the same harsh punishment for serious corruption that affects hundreds of thousands of people as there is for
like our president.
Right. Like it seems like, you know, if you get caught smoking pot or having a blowjob or, you know, grabbing someone's butt, the ramifications for that are far higher than if you are caught accepting tens and millions of dollars of bribes with countries that you are part of foreign policy disputes and whatever, right? But yeah, I think this is a good tactic for them. Fruhmenschen is a good tactic because everybody knows the sting of being betrayed by someone you love in a relationship. Most people have not knowingly been the victim of large-scale corruption. Like, we live in large-scale corruption, but most people have not had someone steal $50,000 from their bank account or their property seized. A few people have, not many, right? So they don't know, they don't have a built-in Pavlovian response to those things the same way people do about, like, if someone's ever been cheated on, then they hear someone else been cheated on, they have this exaggerated response where they feel this camaraderie with a person that they otherwise have nothing in common with.
Right.
So it's low-hanging fruit. It's like, oh, I know how that feels. And if he did that, what else would he do? And whatever. And that seems to take, when it's something people can't imagine, they're willing to accept very elaborate explanations as to like why that's okay, or why you're misunderstanding that, or why it seems to not be in our interest, but really it was in our interest, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's the, you know, we're so far down the pipe now, like there's no correcting that, right? I think the only thing to do is for people who are at that maturity level or intellect level or insight level or whatever it is, and I don't mean that in a superiority way, is just disengage and move farther and farther away from the container and let the intensity in the container become, you know, very like a very tight, dense ball. Like they can argue it out in there and just let it get like really, really small. But everything focused on that, and then take that as our opportunity for the end run, right? Yeah. Like type of thing. I don't think that there's no fixing this shit. Right?
Seems like it. Was there anything else on that document that I'm so fascinated by it?
I'll send it to you, and it's a short. I guess it's you know, there's just a few things about Obama and a few things about.
Is it still in play?
So Laura found this. Now I have the right spelling. So let me look under. Let me see if I can find anything else. This was just one thing she was able to find while we were talking to Cynthia. Let me see if I can find anything else about Fruhmenschen. Oh my God.
The guy on Fringe, the guy who was on Dawson's Creek.
Look at this. This is disgusting. Look at if they really have a program called this is fucking disgusting. This is the first thing that comes up when you write in Fruhmenschen.
Thank you, Obama. Thank you. Right? Black Lives Matter. Good job.
So I just want to see if there's any.
Did you see the new the Lee Merritt interview that she did on InfoWars this week?
No.
I'll send it to you because she very succinctly and in a grounded way like weaves together a lot of kind of alternate conspiracies as to who's the they behind the they behind the they behind the they. Mm-hmm. I just more and more think that the psychopaths pulling the strings cannot be human because it's so antithetical to human nature to off your own species.
Yeah. So there's a few things here about Operation Fruhmenschen, and now that we have the right spelling of it. Yeah, but they're
shut down Obama's operation because I just want to see what year they last posted.
2010, so it's from the same week. And I think this Keisha Rogers person, I've heard her name before. She's part of the LaRouche PAC as well.
Okay.
So
and what are your issues with LaRouche PAC? Are they reliable source?
Hold on, here's something from 1998. So this would have been, this is from the American Almanac. This is Harley Schlanger, also part of LaRouche PAC. So, okay, so.
Go back up to the first paragraph. Sorry.
In March, on March 5th, 1998, Mervyn Dymally, so he was mentioning the other thing, addressed a town meeting in Houston, Texas on the topic of restoring justice to the U.S. Department of Justice. The meeting was the first in a series held. So it sounds like the congressional, what is this thing that Matt Gaetz and all them are doing, the weaponization of government committee? This sounds like it's a lot the same kind of thing, right?
Yep.
The meeting was the first in a series held throughout the nation, organized by the Schiller Institute, in which citizens have joined with political and constituency leaders to build a movement to put an end to the systemic prosecutorial abuse which has characterized the actions of the permanent bureaucracy. So it's exactly the same thing. This is in 1990, so we're 25 years out from that. It's just in the 25-year cycle.
Okay.
So here we go. I'm just going to skip a paragraph. The Houston case was typical of those made by the DOJ against thousands of minority leaders elected to office. The case grew out of an FBI operation designed specifically to target minorities named Operation Fruhmenschen. Right. So this is the original saying. This was in 1998. And then they were saying in 2010 that Obama had revived it, when, kind of thing.
Yep.
So here's some information about it that looks a little different. I'll just send this over to you. I'll link to these few articles here, and people can, if anybody wants to do a Fruhmenschen rabbit hole dive, then we'll be willing to hear what you have to say on the other side of it. I don't want to necessarily say, so LaRouche PAC, right? So is based around Lyndon LaRouche and his wife, Helga Zepp LaRouche, right? And they have, he's run for president. He's very old now. I think he's still alive, but I don't think he's operating publicly anymore, right? So let's look at the, since Wikipedia has been so bombed today, let's see what they say about him, right? Lyndon Hermile LaRouche, right, so he passed away in 2019. Okay, was an American political activist who founded the LaRouche movement and its main organization, the National Caucus of Labor Committees. He was a prominent conspiracy theorist and perennial presidential candidate. He ran several times. He began in far left politics, but in the 70s moved to the far right. His movement is sometimes described as or likened to a cult. Convicted of fraud, he served 5 years in prison from 1989 to 1994. Okay, so basically he was definitely left wing, and then when he discovered certain things about our government and spoke out against him, then they called him right wing, even though most of his policies are really more breeded in left wing ideology. He was always proposing policies and this, that, and the other thing. He was very outspoken about the repeal of Glass-Steagall and all of that kind of stuff, right? The thing that makes me uncomfortable about the LaRouche PAC movement is that they all speak the same. So there's a language or a dialect or some diction, and they're still operational. And I can always tell when I'm listening to someone who's part of LaRouche PAC, because they have certain terminology that only they use.
Yep.
And it's the stringency with which they use it is it's kind of similar to when Tulsi Gabbard does this stuff that it's she's just she's gone from normal human into her implanted script kind of thing.
So do you agree that it's a cult?
I would agree that it has cult-like characteristics, but that doesn't mean that they're not right about a lot of things. I would say that they're more right than they are wrong, but the way that they have functioned have kept them very separate from integrating with the public at large. The most integration it has right now is that one of the guys from LaRouche PAC is one who goes to all of the AOC events and screams at her about why she's going along with the Ukraine thing. And I think he's pressed right. He's been on the Jimmy Dore show, and this guy who's the new kind of representative that's going out and doing things. So they do a lot of good stuff. But I think that this, the way that they use language, it speaks to a group thing that happens that, based on my life experience, makes me uncomfortable. But that doesn't make them wrong.
Right.
Right. So that's what I would say about them.
Got it.
So, and there's definitely this, you see the same kind of change in people when they become part of the LaRouche PAC movement that you see when somebody becomes starts selling Amway or Mary Kay or Avon, where their whole life then becomes situated around that, and they use the language and they socialize in those circles and they behave in that way. Or when someone joins CrossFit or whatever, there's all kinds of these folks, right? right? You know, they join CrossFit and then they're on the paleo diet and then they're wearing socks up to their knees and then they're, the whole thing, right? Okay. So yeah. Okay. So, all right. So I just wanted to thank her for the Fruhmenschen, because I think this is an interest. I've not heard that terminology before, and that is gross. And remember, people got in trouble for likening Michelle and Barack Obama to monkeys or whatever, but then they're pushing if this is true, they're pushing the Fruhmenschen, which is like literally likening yeah, it's disgusting, but it's always like this. It's always like that.
Yep.
So, okay. So what did you think though? Like, was there anything else that came up during the course of the conversation that you wanted to sort of poke into a little bit more now that we're out of the time constraint?
I just wish I had 3 more hours with her to like drill. I wanted to learn more about our relationship with Israel. I wanted to know more about Trump's relationship with Israel. Like, I just wanted more time, but it was awesome.
Yeah, I feel like this was like, I think if we can stay connected to her, we can get maybe a series of shows where we can just choose, let's just dig down on this one thing or this one thing. But because I hadn't spoken to her in so long and you never had, I just wanted to kind of like get a broad swath there. But yeah, I mean, I also think though that like at this point she has been out of it for a long time, right? And so there's probably some things at play that she wouldn't recognize, right? Because of like she's still, I think she learns pretty quick, but she gets operations run against her because of the things she doesn't know.
Yeah.
Right. Like, she's very, I think that she has an idea in her head about what is right. And then if you think something is right, what you should do to back up that idea that something is right. And so she does it and doesn't necessarily consider the people around her that are doing the right thing with her and that what their intentions are and whatnot. And so sometimes she finds herself in things. And I think she got very hip and wise to what was going on in Washington while she was there. But I don't know that she's completely hip and wise to all of the ways in which she is sort of trafficked informationally that are literally operations against her. And like, I'm thinking about that crazy tour she did with Robert David Steele, where like it was so obvious to me that he was being used to completely make it impossible for it to ever even be considered for her to run in office again here. Yep. Right. So
do you think Sasha Stone was in on that as well?
I have a lot of thoughts about Sasha Stone, right? But I know that like you've been exploring the Sasha Stone reality, and so I have chosen.
I dressed like him today. He was my wardrobe inspiration.
Yeah. So I have chosen not to say anything until you ask me.
I want to know. I'm asking.
Okay. So it's hard to say, right? It's hard to say, but I know that there are some people that I've never met him. I've never spoken with him, but I know people who have. And like some of them have really hostile feelings about him now, and others just see him as an imperfect person who's lived through a lot of shit. And, so both could be reasonable explanations. But I will say this, whenever some new idea is presented as a solution to the problems we have that blends some level of like metaphysics or indigenous stuff with like policy and activism and whatever, he's always right there at the beginning of it, and they always fail, and people are always brought down, and then he's always there at the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one. Like there's been no hopeful movement that he hasn't been a major part of. So whether he is doing it or it's being done, something is being done through him, I don't know. But like for me, it's just always stay away. There's no, like, I don't have an opinion on him per se. But like, I probably wouldn't want to like speak at a conference where he was, because I would have to wonder what else was going on there, even if it's entirely possible that he really just is a person who has this desire to do good and over and over and over again falls for the same nonsense. Or, he's a person who's cultivated an image that's effective enough at getting people to go along with something long enough to distract. I don't know what's happening. Right. That's it. That's all I have to say. But yeah, like I have no evidence for anything. But he was part of that whole thing too.
Right. That's why I asked.
Yeah, he also has been part of like these places that were like trying to build like a commune and get all the people who agreed about things to go live on that commune. He also was part of like some of the stuff around the Breakthrough Energy Conference when that was having its moment many years ago, and then that flopped. And right, so it's just at a certain point you start to look at who the players are.
I do wonder, and I wonder this about a few people, including Robert Forte. But given his age, he looks very young and very youthful. And I have heard him talk about the med beds are real or this and that. And I'm like, well, how is he getting access to this tech?
So I don't know. I like the med beds are a whole other thing.
Right.
I think probably, both of those people have a special set of genetics, which is why they're used the way that they're used.
Right.
They do have like, there's a very real person in Robert Forte. That's exactly who Robert Forte is. He's a great psychonaut. He is very bright. He does have this youthful sort of kind of thing, like right now, like you maybe those genetics, they also know that, oh, like this is a great person, like, or to get other people to follow them, it's probably like the same set of skills. Like just you and I were both gymnasts, and while we can agree that gymnastics is probably not the most important thing in the world, if someone is good at gymnastics, they likely also have just great spatial and kinesthetic awareness, and that might be good for a lot of other things. And so the same things that make them have some of these magical qualities can be twisted into sheepdogging, getting them to be sheepdog, all that. I don't know, right?
Let me ask you, because it just sparked a memory, and I think you might have been at Geo. You were at Geo straight through being little kid. I moved over to Geo from Le Club, but I remember trying out and Fritz like measuring my femur bone, and like it was all about like proportions. And I felt like a piece of me. I was furious at how my body was being rated by this person. Did he do that to you as well?
So I started at Geo when I was 2, right? And then like I started down the track of like hot shots and super shots and whatever, like at 5 or 6.
Yeah.
So like there's less mysteries when you're watching someone from when they're 2 as to what their body may or may not do. Right. Than when you are getting someone at what, 10, 11, 12, something. I don't know how old you were when you came over.
11.
I think also like, I have no vision in my head of your mom, but I still remember what your dad looked like. Right. But I can't remember what your mom looked like, but one would just look at my mom's body and know that I was going to be petite. So I don't know what looking at your mom's body.
My mom was morbidly obese.
That's right. So that's probably like neither of my parents. My dad, like as a later adult, became a little bit big in the tummy, but certainly when I started at Geo, right, he was a little bit tall, but not that tall, and he had very muscular legs. He'd been a football player. My mom was built pretty similar to me, right? So I think that it was pretty clear what the genetics were, but also he had watched my body develop from 2 to 6 to whatever. Right. So I think there was that, but no, I mean, gymnastics is a lot about proportion, right? Like the biggest thing, there's certainly, there's exceptions to all rules, but I know because I coached gymnastics for a long time, what I'm looking for. You definitely want the person's shoulders to be the broadest point on their body. Right. You want the hips to be, about half the size of even when they're young. I mean, when they're like 4 or 5, not so much, but by the time they're 7 or 8 and their body is starting to develop from doing strength or whatever, you want the shoulders to be broad. You want the hips to be very narrow. You want the, bottom part of their femur and the upper part of the calf to be about the same size. You know what I mean? Like you want, there's definitely, it's a lot about proportion. They'd say proportion dictates about 90% of the time. There are anomalous things all the time, especially as the equipment has changed.
Right.
But I mean, there's all kinds of weird, like we don't know because we're so confused about what all of these things mean. We're just sold a bill of goods about this is considered attractive, this is not considered attractive, right? That's it. So, but there's lots of people out there that know that, like, oh my God, like people whose forearm bone is longer than their whatever bone, those people also have this genetics that make them able, we don't get any of that.
That's what I was, that's the reason why I was
You have to
asking.
remember where he comes from.
Austria.
Right? And so, which is the same place that Hitler came from, contrary to, right? So I'm not saying he's Hitler, that's not my point, but they had nailed, eugenics is only presented as one thing to the public, that it's always this creation of this Aryan race and the killing of everyone who's not that.
Yeah.
Eugenics is basically figuring out like what someone's genes dictate the possibilities are for that person.
Right.
And there could be, that could be a useful science. I don't think you should use that science to create policy, but if we all understood, like, you know, if we all understood what our most opportune fields of pursuit and study were, doesn't mean there should be a policy that you have to pursue them. But like, you know, if I knew that like I would be naturally good at this, then at least trying it to see if you like it would make sense. But we're kept in this delusional state that everything is about what something looks like, just in terms of an attractiveness kind of thing. I mean, babies are attracted to faces that are perfectly symmetrical, right? You know, like that is a natural human attraction. So I think we instinctively know how to measure a proportion, and that will be important, but we're not ever told why. It's made about being pretty or not pretty. Right. And it's kind of like what she said about how he just knew to follow the stars and whatever, right? Like we can look at something and go, this is balanced or this is not balanced. But we've lost touch of that because they replaced that with this is attractive or this is not attractive.
Totally.
Right. So yeah, so I think that there's probably, you know, I think it would be really nice if we could all deeply understand who we are, where we come from, and what that means about likely possibilities for us in a really holistic way. Yeah. Yeah. So, but I think that's part of the genetic collections, the dossier collections, and this, that, and the other thing. Like, you know, they know who's susceptible to what nonsense or what good stuff or whatever it is, right? So, so I had this. So, do you want to hear about when Cynthia McKinney came up in my psychedelic experience? Yes. Okay. So the psychedelic experiences are always very different when I do them at the house in Van Nuys than if I do it here or like someplace I'm on vacation or at a party or whatever, because so like my family is, other than we don't know what happened before that land was like settled in any way, but only my family has ever lived in that house, right? Like that's that's the house that my grandparents and when my dad and his parents moved here from Brooklyn, right, in the late 40s, they lived in an apartment with other family for a little bit, and then they bought this house in Van Nuys for $10,000 cash, and they've expanded it and upgraded it and done things over time, but no one else has ever lived there except for our family. And my grandmother has collected all of these things from all over the world because she was a travel agent and she traveled everywhere. And so there's all of this stuff, these items from all over the world that carry an energy about them that, you know, she didn't order them online. She went there and she bought them before that was a thing. She came home with stories about them. And then there's also been, you know, for many, many years, just copious documents stored there. Some of them have been removed now at this point, but that information was sitting in that location for a really long time. And it's like bled into that energy field of whatever that location is. That coordinate is loaded with cultural and political and societal and familial information in a way that like this apartment is not for me anyway, right? Okay. So I think that sometimes when I open myself up there, the information that's available based on that opening up is actually more pertinent to me than the information that's available everywhere else. Yeah. So I just remember in this one trip, and I think I'm pretty sure this was when we were still living there. I did do mushrooms there one time after we had moved away, but we're back there for a time. But I can't remember if this was, I feel like this was probably during COVID or I don't know, or maybe just before COVID. I don't remember. But all of a sudden I was thinking about Cynthia McKinney in my trip. And you have to learn how to like decode your own mushroom experiences, because it seemed to be saying that like my family was somehow connected to her and her family. And I didn't think that it meant we were like related or necessarily that we knew each other, although maybe there's someone in the family that does. She is from Stone Mountain, Georgia. And like my grandmother did have friends and like people that, you know how they have those people that they call cousins, but you don't really know if they're really cousins or not, that lived in that area. And that's where she was from and the representative for, and her dad before her and all that kind of stuff. But that like, this was like, that throughout, it was more like this was the feeling I got, that like throughout dissident history, there were groups of people that were allied outside of the scene, right? That helped make certain things possible for other people. Right. And that you and I both know that, you know, though it's never talked about, there are lots of Jewish people that are anti-Zionists, that are against what Israel is doing, that were never for slavery, that sort of encapsulate the best interpretation of someone who was like liberal or open-minded or socially open or whatever, right? And that there was like that whatever allowed, because she comes from a well-to-do, successful, intellectual, I don't think wealthy, but prosperous enough, you know, like Black family, that there was like a support system between a certain group of Jews in the United States and certain Black activists or whatever that made certain things possible. That there may not, just like some Jews are blamed for everything, some of the things we see with advancements might not have been possible without certain groups offering their support, whether overtly or whatever. And it was weird. It just, you know how like there's these like weird symbolic energetic connections that you sense and feel, right? And it was like, oh, okay, like there's this network of people that are like what my grandmother was and maybe what her ancestors were, that supported each other and that moved both of their scenarios sort of forward. And that, you know, like, that's why I like her. Right. That's why, like, I felt, because I have, you know, no desire for any politicians or whatever, but like, maybe I saw in her the same thing that like my grandmother saw when she chose to become politically active with the group or not, that there's like some people that are just good people and worth supporting and backing and whatever. But it was really weird. I don't think of her as like related to psychedelic space in any way at all. So it was surprising when I found myself, it was just short, but I never forgot it. It was just like this weird sort of moment that came through, right? That there's this like psychedelic sort of metaphysical alternate space sort of railroad of people that help each other, right? Or it was bizarre, but yeah, I just, but when I see her sort of willing to entertain some of these conversations that no other person who was concerned about maintaining their you know, their political bona fides or whatever would really engage in, not only having them, but thanking us for reminding her that she should think about these things too. I'm like, no, this is right. Like my grandmother was some kind of psychonaut. And even if she didn't eat mushrooms, she knew how to work. You've not been to the house. You've been to the house in Van Nuys. You have been to the house in Van Nuys. Laura treated you there. Right. So like, if you go and look in the cabinets that she has and all the different stuff, there's all these weird, like little symbols and sigils. Like she knows how to work the ancient technology, even if she's not using the medicine to do it, even if she's just using the artwork or the meditation. She has like all the like yantras and young books with the mandalas and whatever, right? She knows how to work that to connect with sort of other like valued people outside of space and time. Right?
I mean, there was so much less interference back then, electromagnetic distractions and whatnot. So you and I might not need medicine if we were, you know, we were doing what we were doing now then, because there wasn't so much static
on the property there's, so my dad has a name for the kind of palm trees. They're the palm trees that she did not plant, supposedly. This is his story, and his memory is not always 100%, but that they just grew. They were like, I forget the name. I'll ask him what the name of that kind of palm tree is. It's not about the style of palm tree. It's about like how they grow, right? That are just naturally there. They're by far the tallest palm trees in the neighborhood, and they're set up. It looks like they were set up in a. I just spilled water on my computer. Shit. Hold on a second.
Blessings on Emily's computer being totally safe. Mercury retrograde. You can slow your roll.
Okay.
Give Emily a break.
Okay, hold on. Let me move the computer far away from that. Okay, I think it's okay. I spilled water on my computer yesterday.
I feel like that's how my reflexes have gotten quicker and quicker, is how many times I've spilled water on my keyboard.
Yep. Okay, I'm going to do this just because I want to. Sorry, but I'm moving the computer away from that area for right now because it's much to clean up. So I'm going to finish. I'm going to finish the show from here, even though it doesn't sound as good. We're almost to the end anyway.
I have a surprise for you, so you got to save 5 minutes for me.
Okay, for sure. Okay, so so the palm trees are set up in this way that look like if you were setting up some sort of grid of protection, this would be how you did it. And then there's all of these very tall, like some kind of tree that looks sort of like Christmas trees lining one side of the property, right? There's just some interest. While there's a lot of electrical wires around, like Laura and I both agree, there's like, it feels like the things are not penetrating. It feels like, right?
Force field.
Yeah. So remember though, I don't think it was the same trip as the Cynthia McKinney thing, but I had that one trip where I was talking to the trees in the backyard and they were telling me that they were the original 5G towers and that they can do all the things that the 5G towers do, but they're also beautiful and they don't do the yucky stuff. Right. So like, maybe there's enough of them around there that's also sort of been protected.
Yeah.
I agree with you, right? And I think there is something to like, I don't know what happened on the land before. No one has showed up saying that, hey, this house is built on the ground that my ancestors are buried on. I know that's a reality in Chatsworth. I've not heard that said about this location, right? But I'm pretty sure that like we're the only family that's ever had structure and made domicile there and whatever, right? And there is something to that building up of information and energy and all of that kind of stuff that is like a very real thing. And it would not surprise me if there's shit buried all around the property that is cultivating some of that kind of stuff, right? It seems like Laura always taps into it, and my friend Vanessa, who's very psychic, that like my grandmother is still guarding the property. It's very important. She doesn't like when you do this. She likes when you do that. She's sorry about this. She made a mistake with that. There's always a lot of that kind of information and lots of some very weird sort of supernatural metaphysical-y things go on there sometimes as well. Right. So
one time maybe you and I should do a deep dive into Van Nuys, because that's where I grew up. You grew up in Chatsworth, but we moved there from Santa Monica. And when I remember my childhood memories, it's always doing what you and I do now. It was like playing witch, decoding symbols, trying to solve mysteries based on like shapes and little objects I would find near the house. And when I look back, it's like I'm doing exactly what I used to do. Was like I knew there was something more to what I was being shown and always looking, and that was always in Van Nuys. And Van Nuys has a shitty reputation. Like it's considered the worst town, it's the most devoid of culture or cultural value or relevance in the San Fernando Valley. Growing up there, I was mocked ceaselessly. Friends were literally not allowed to come to my house because it was, such a shitty neighborhood. It became a Mexican barrio relatively quickly after we moved there. Like, I just think that would be interesting for us to dive into at some point.
We should definitely do a deeper dive, but just real quickly, I want to show you something. So where did you live? So we were right here at the corner of Victory and like, so this is, we're at Victory and Sepulveda. Basically, we're in
I
this
was
area
further
here.
south towards Farrell's,
Towards,
like Kester, Sherman Way.
yep, okay.
So I was in like the shitty, like a shittier part than
So
you.
here's Kester and Sherman Way. Okay, so you were here, and I was over here, like I was between Sepulveda and the 405, and between Victory and Van Owen, right?
Yep.
So I was right in here.
So I was on Bevis, which was off of. I'm looking, and I have such a shitty sense of direction. Off of Hart Street. So
here it is, right here. Here it is. I see it. Bevis is right there.
Correct.
So there's Bevis and Blucher. We're over here, right? Yep. Okay. I'm under the Firmament and above the Aqueduct. Those are the streets that I'm between, which is interesting when you think about the reality we live in. Okay. Yep. So you were here. So this neighborhood that I was in, the properties are huge, right? Yep. The land pieces of land are very big. And it was like one of the first neighborhoods in that area, right? Yep. They have kept it pretty nice. Even though there's hookers right here on Sepulveda, this area in here, like when they're about to turn this into an opportunity zone, so like smart city shit and whatever, it's built all around this. So this will stay the same. This will not have any of that, and everything around it turns into the opportunity zone, right? Yep. So this is a historic neighborhood. I'm generally familiar with this area, but I can't say that I've ever been into this little, you know, section of that.
It would only be if you went to any birthday parties at Farrell's as a kid.
I've been to Farrell's, yeah, but there was a Farrell's in the valley, in like off of Reseda as well, right? So I don't know if it's possible I went to that one. That wasn't the front one in my memory, but yes, I've definitely been to Farrell's. Okay, so what's interesting about all of this? All right, so this is the oldest neighborhood, one of the oldest neighborhoods in the San Fernando Valley, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here's the Firmament, here's the Aqueduct, here's the Underwear, here's Haskell Avenue. This is where Geo was. Look at this. So this is also where the train line runs across. See the red dots?
Yep.
Okay. And Geo is
also
up
where
here.
the Wiener Factory was.
It's true. Right? Geo was up here.
Yep.
Right? It was up in this area up here. Okay. Look at where I live now. So I live right here off of Lakeshore. But if you dig in.
For some reason today, every time I see I'm just noticing this, every time I look at Austin, my mind is wanting to make it autism.
Probably right. So look here, this is Haskell right here. This is where I live. So I live equidistant from Haskell in both places.
Oh, that's interesting.
And this is a throughway or a freeway, and this is a river. So I have to cross that to get there. Do you know what Haskell is?
No, I was just going to ask.
Haskell is a programming language.
Oh.
Haskell is a general purpose, statically typed, purely functional programming language with type inference and lazy evaluation. Right? It was first appeared 33 years ago, right? In 1990, it's purely functional. It's a purely functional programming language.
That's interesting. 33 years ago, I just 44 came up today. I'm thinking of ruthenium. I'm just thinking of these angel numbers.
I took some ruthenium today. I'm taking ruthenium right now.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so Haskell, like it. Oh, look at this. There's something about fission. Fission to build rock solid, maintain. Okay, but I did a deep dive on both Glass Bead Game and on the Dumps with Chef into the Haskell programming language and the things that it's connected to. Yep. So if we're looking at, so lots of people think Haskell is the greatest programming language of all time. Well, what do? You deal in language, and I deal in mind control programming. We both spent a lot of times as kids on Haskell.
A lot of time.
Right. So I see neighborhoods as neural networks, and I see like cities and the country itself as laid out. It's like taking the steps of initiation intellectually or spiritually or metaphysically and laying them out geographically, right? And so if we're here, like, let's just say that you're about to, let's just say Philip K. Dick is right, and we're living in a computer programmed reality, and the only clue you would have that this was so is that something had fundamentally changed from the way that you remembered it sort of before that famous speech he gave, right? Yep. So if they're in the 70s and 80s.
Before you click that, I just want to note all of the predictive Ukraine programming on the right side of the screen with all the
100%, 100%, right? Okay, so if they're mapping out, mocking up, think about what was going on in the 70s. Remember, Geo had a distinctively late 70s, early 80s feel about it, with the orange brown carpet and the purple and orange leotards, and the fact that we had a solid gold dancer there teaching us. It like had this like Boogie Nights feel about it at Geo, totally. Right? So that was the—
we were on. Geo had a relationship with Solid Gold. They would put us on Solid Gold. Right.
Because of Kahea. Right. So this was like that time period. Like, I even remember being in the gym when I was little, and when I look around, like, reality looks different now than then. Things were fuzzier, they were grainier. The reality didn't seem as like high definition as it does now. Right. So
no, it was like we were going into a program with that weird industrial lighting.
Yes.
Hazy and chalky. We always chalked it up to the chalk, right? But like nothing was really clear. Everything was a little bit opaque.
And if you looked at those lights on the ceiling long enough, you were in a trance.
Correct.
Right? Okay. So, but it like let's just say that Geo was at part of it, central to some sort of mind control program that was going on right at that time. And you have it right there. You're going to use the things that, I mean, the placement is key. That gym is still there. Every other gym is like moved fucking around. It is still there. Right. So location is important, and think about that some of the characters that we know that have passed through Geo over the years and all of the weird stuff. I mean, I had all the weird interactions with the Sybil Shepherd and the this and that. I don't know if you've seen any of the stuff I've done on Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd and whatever on the Glass Speed Game and whatever, but lots of weird things that had a huge connection to Hollywood. Mm-hmm. Right. You know, and it was a very different kind of gym than Le Club or Jets. Or Jets grew out of Le Club and whatever. It had its particular role that it was playing. I'd say that Jets had something going on there later. I can't speak to Le Club because I never went there.
Well, and it also had a different reputation than every other gym in Los Angeles.
It was the only gym that was a nonprofit. Right. And so one of the things that I discovered is that my mom's company paid for my gymnastics.
I remember you telling me that.
Right. But if they were going to pay for it, I had to go there because it was a nonprofit. So it was considered a donation.
Right.
So it's just, like, sure, there's like the version of things that everyone buys that, oh yes, that's what corporations do. They make contributions to their communities. Or if you're looking for, if you're an oil company, if you're an oil company in front and in the back, you're experimenting with hyperdimensional physics, mind control technology, free energy, all this different kind of stuff, right? And you are trying to sort of create a pipeline or a pathway for candidates who may work in that area later, who need to have a certain level of intellect, but also a certain level of kinesthetic awareness and physical ability and whatnot.
And tolerance for pain. Understanding German, whatever the fuck it is, right? Then that makes it, like when I went back and looked at like I had an old yearbook from Geo, and like the donations were all from like Raytheon and this and that, and right. So think about it. I mean, we still haven't solved the Bronwyn Garrity mystery, right? She's the producer of all of these sci-fi shows. And for some reason, my meth-infused chant on the toilet for 10 years was her name, right? Like, why? Well, and that also ties in.
Gymnastics
You and I will need to bookmark this because that ties into my Iboga journeys. The name Bronwyn.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a German name, right? Bronwyn is a German name.
It's Welsh.
It's Welsh. Okay.
It means blessed breast.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. But just what I have figured out is that every place that I have lived has the same things arranged around it in a very similar position.
That's
right? Like, okay, so when I lived in Tucson, I lived on River Road and the estates right above me were Oracle. I live right off of Riverside here and the company Oracle is next door to me.
My property's on River Road.
The street that runs between it is Waterloo, right? If I look at where my mom grew up in Ohio, she lived in an area called Euclid, where there's a Waterloo Arts District right off of the river with a Lakeshore Drive. So I live between Riverside and Lakeshore Drive and Waterloo over here, right? Oracle's here. Every place I go, the things are arranged in the same kind of arrangement around it. So if cities or neighborhoods are arranged as like a grid on a programming language network design, like if I just go right to Haskell, I go right to Haskell and then I understand the programming language that I'm operating in, and I will intentionally move towards things that have the commands that I am supposed to follow genetically. So my mom is from Euclid, Ohio. Like Euclid, Ohio is named after Euclid, creator of Euclidean geometry, which is like the basis for masonry and all of this kind of stuff. So inbred in me is sort of this attraction to this way of orienting myself. Remember the temporalis, what was the OTO? We were talking about orienting yourself in the temporal realm. Like there seems to be something inside of me that is driving me to do that. So my mom went for her whole life to the eye doctor at UCLA and then to Jewel Stein Eye Institute. And I often wonder, because she had all these eye issues, if there was something in her eye that was directing her behavior. Let me show you this from Fringe too, since everyone else has seen this, but you're going to love this. Observer, you're going to love this. Oh, I have to go to YouTube to do it. Hold on a second. Let me go Fringe. Peter's Observer. All right, where is it? Peter's eye. Where is it? Okay, Peter the Observer. Why can't I find this one? Oh, here we go. I've played this one before, but now I can't find it. Oh, let's try this one. Okay. Oh, the Observer did.
As I'm in the midst of applying for red.
Check this out. Right? Like, what if this is how it works? And what if are these things placed in our eyes?
Residency right now. Wish me luck. Grammarly has again been a lifesaver with my application.
Was that Scooby-Doo in the back part of what he's researching?
Everything's a part of everything.
Hello.
Peter, I need you here immediately. Where are you?
I'm in a cab on my way to the bus station.
Bus station? Where are you going?
New York. You wanted me to stay away from her, remember? A bus is a good amount of transportation as anyway you're trying to get out of town.
You didn't tell me. Anyway, you must come back to the lab at once.
Why? What's going on?
I think the Observer may have done something to your eye.
Whatever he did, it wasn't seen by the other observers.
All I care about is what he's done to you. what's in New York?
I told you, Walter. It's what's not in New York. Olivia.
Is it a needle? I can't
I
look.
admire you, Peter.
He just gave him an eye drop.
Why's that, Walter?
I told you what the right thing ethically was to do, leaving Olivia. But I don't know that I would have had the strength to do it myself.
Is that your way of thanking me for taking your advice?
It's a particularly obtuse way to admit that you're a better man than I. Is that Greek?
Yeah. Yeah, it means be a better man than your father. Something I was told a long time ago. But it is very strange to hear you say it. What is it?
There's something in there. It's got writing on it.
It's an address.
228.5 Morrow Street. It's amazing. I suspect this message, if left alone to run its course, would have fully dissolved, taking its place firmly in your mind's eye.
You think this would have etched itself into my brain?
Organic ocular suggestion. You wouldn't be aware, but you would be irresistibly compelled to visit.
Dr. Bishop?
What?
Agent Farnsworth said to bring her in if we were here first.
Who is she?
Jane Hall.
I think it's a case, Walter.
Oh, right. Well, fine. Bring the poor dear down and put her on the slab.
Okay, so basically there's a little implant placed in his eye that has information on it.
Yep.
Right? Now, if you look into like occult eye optometry and so like there's all this weird stuff. There was like a society of like occult alchemical eye doctors in ancient Egypt. They had different eye doctor for the right eye and the left eye and whatever. I think our eyes are much more, they are much more important in determining lots of things about ourselves and our reality and our lives and whatever than what we've led to believe, right? Go ahead.
Have you heard of Robert Tennyson Stevens?
No.
Robert Tennyson Stevens wrote Conscious Languaging, which I didn't come onto until after I read R. Neville Johnson's book. So I had found my way to the languaging work that I do through a different channel. But Robert Tennyson Stevens is kind of like the modern day father of the work that I do with a more of a Jesus bent. Mm-hmm. He wrote the book Conscious Languaging. His other area of expertise is in iridology.
Right. So Anne, my mentor for the nutrition, she also was an iridologist, right? But that's another thing that's common amongst, so it's not exclusive to Jews, but it's most common amongst Jews, and that is the central heterochromia, which is the multiple colors within the eyes, right? So central like heterochromia.
Do you have that in your eyes?
I do have, I do. Almost everyone I know has it, right? Mm-hmm. It's very rare, but almost everyone I know has it. Mm-hmm. So let's just pull up some central heterochromia eyes here, right? My eyes are pretty similar to like some of these, right? But you can have fully brown eyes. You can have brown eyes and have it. You can have hazel eyes. Now, iridology, like there's a lot of people that believe that all of this colors and spots are really have to do with like nutritional imbalances or health problems, and they will try to predict kidney problems or whatever based on, you know, spots in the eye or color patterns or whatever. But there's like another school of thought that all of this contains a lot of information about the person's character, but also about like that you can sort of map their lifetimes through the eyes. Like maybe a person who has traveled like that, there's evidence, you know, whenever you watch any of these science fiction movies, there's always the scene where they zoom in close on the eye and the eye always looks like that, right? I don't know if when you have had a high energy or a hyperdimensional experience, it creates a mark. So people with lots of colors and lots of markings in their eyes, that's evidence that they've like moved through dimensions or moved through different energy fields or had the most lifetimes or had the most amount of like traumatic or ecstatic experiences based on like the little speckles or something. But if
wait, go back and scroll up. No, the other way. Heterochromia iridium. Iridium is another
element. Yes.
Right.
Yes. Right. So these are all like, maybe these are indicators of concentrations of elements in your blood. And therefore knowing, like, if you're a person who's really good at this, you'll know, okay, this person has 6% ruthenium, 7% iridium, 19% this, this is the things they can do. These are the places they can go. Right. But also let's go look at this now. You can see very well in here that there's a few of these little black speckles.
Yep.
Right? Well, what if those speckles are like markers? Like what if there's things in the eye that are either there to block you from remembering something or to force you to think about something or remember something? This seems like some very occulted things people could do to determine the life path or of their offspring or whatever it is. Like if you really, I don't know, right? But like my mom was in this Jules Eye Institute and this Dr. What's the name of the bears that changed the Mandela? Bernstein, right? Or whatever, right? Her whole life, she was going to the same eye doctor. And then at a certain point, she started going to the Jules Stein Eye Institute. And that's a really weird place if you start to look into it.
Yeah,
right?
I've heard you talk about it.
I like in all of these shows that we watch, there's like weird stuff with the eyes. I've heard people, I met somebody who used to work in like removing people's corneas, right? For corneal transplants and things like that. And he said that the toll that job took on him, like he will never be the same. The things that he saw happen and what goes on. So like, I don't know if there's information stored there. I don't know if this is like,
can we grill him as to what he means by that? Could we have him on the show? And I want to go deeper into what he saw and how it upended his worldview.
He's a longtime listener and supporter. So I just met him once in a bar and he told me a little bit about this. So I could press him a little farther on it. I don't know that this is for him, right? Based on his just how he is, but I can certainly ask him for another conversation about it. But think about like all the weird things that are going on with like the retina and, all the weird things they do to eyes now, the laser surgeries and the LASIK surgeries and all of this weird.
Well, here's another thing. I know someone whose son was killed in a car accident and he had done the donor thing, which she was like, never fucking do. And it was during like hard lockdown. So they kept him alive on life support for like 2 weeks for all of the organs, but then and it was like torture for the family because there was no closure. But ultimately they said, well, we can't use anything because he has COVID. She found out after the fact that they took his eyes and gave them to someone else.
Right. Yeah. So in that Peripheral show that Bronwyn Garrity has, like how they use the eyes is really fucking weird. Like they're perfectly happy to put someone's soul and consciousness in a fake body, but they are desperate to get their real eyes into that body, and that specific eyes open doorways and things like this, right? Like there's this huge obsession with capturing the eyeballs of specific people.
Well, I mean, just think of how you see the world, how I see the world, how rare that
lens of perception.
Right.
Like I think this is what I think that people who study, even like within the projects or programs, they become very fascinated with the way people see things, and they want to see. There's a Depeche Mode song, we've talked about this, let me show you the world through my eyes. There's a Depeche Mode song for everything that matters, basically. Right? But yeah, like I think that the eyes are as much a determinant of how a person sees and is in the world as the consciousness, the brain, the heart, all that kind of stuff. But we think of them as just seeing devices. We don't think of them as being like a conscious and intelligent interface between the physical act of seeing and the conscious act of perceiving.
Yeah.
Something that someone sent me about cryptochromes in birds' eyes. So it was about they were trying to replicate in drones these cryptochromes that were in birds' eyes that help them orient themselves, right, in nature. So if there's cryptochromes in birds' eyes, why wouldn't there also be in ours? And so if you think about the wars that have been fought over pigments and dyes, like that Han purple and there's like a purple that like escapes dimension, like it's a color that exists outside of physical dimensions at a certain whatever type of thing. So we think of those as external, right? But what if we have some of us with interesting eyes, or even people who have eyes that look normal and boring, but maybe there's some timbre or tone in there. Like, what if those chromes, those tones, that whatever they are, that pigmentation is key to unlocking certain layers of information in the things that we're perceiving, right? So the color, the pigments that are available, the chromes inside of your eyes decode the things you see with a different set. There's more information for some people, a second set.
It's interesting that you say that, just because I'm just thinking like my eyes change color all the time.
Mine too. Right? Mine too. So like it's a kind of shape shifting, it's a kind of like tuning your eyes to understand stuff. But like what if, we don't know because we only ever see through our eyes. Right? What if you were to come into my eyes and all of a sudden it looked like, I want to show, since we're on the fringe thing today, let's just go balls out and let's look at what the world looks like through the observer's eyes.
I've always wondered this ever since I was a little kid. Like, who says that we're seeing the same things? And what I have come to define as purple isn't, really what you're seeing is green, but how, it's like, who says it's uniform what all of our eyes are seeing?
Trying to figure out how I can ask this, Fringe, how reality looks to observers. I know it's been how reality looks to observers. It would be great if I could type without doing like 10 million typos in each sentence. All right,
that would be great. I hold that for you someday, that aspiration.
I want to I want to show how
RFK holds Palestine's aspirations for them. I'm holding that aspiration for you.
I can't, I want to like see, okay, there's the when we just looked at some last week, fringe, pocket dimension, pocket universe. Let me just see. There's one. Okay,
Pocket universe was my friend's Burning Man camp and DJ collective.
Okay, hold on a second. This is. I want to see. There's one little blip here where they show what the reality looks like to the observers. Let me just see if I can find it. Let me just. I don't want to watch the whole thing because I might have to look at 3 different videos. Okay, no, it wasn't that one. There's 2 other possibilities. So pocket universe. Okay, no, it's not that one. So let's be the other one. Let's see. Oh, getting out. Maybe it's the getting out one. Let's see.
Is that a toilet?
Yeah.
You mean to tell me we've been living here all this time and you never told me?
Olivia, cross right here.
It's back here. Let's just watch this one and see if.
Come
See, that's what they see. They're looking at the same room. See, there's the desk and the chairs, but they see this grid and they can see there's an energy fold right there.
Also that it's blue, which we're gonna bookmark for my surprise.
So then they knew how to get into the pocket dimension, which is where they were hiding.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So now let's say that let's just say you got to try on the Emily glasses and suddenly there was an element about reality that was there almost everywhere you went. That's not what it looked like in your eyes. Like maybe I have some grid or some, like I'm able to see some kind of light that you can't. But we never have this conversation. We just assume that everybody else is seeing what we're seeing, except for on the rare occasion when we'll look up at the sky and when you see the cloud, you'll see a bunny and I'll see a mouse. But then you show me how it's a bunny. And then after a lot of work, I can see it.
Yep.
But only because you explained to me the coordinates of how you were projecting all that, right? But we could be walking around seeing completely different sets of information about the same scaffolding, different things projected on there, right? How did we get here from Cynthia?
Right.
Okay, but I think we're done. I think we've been doing this for more than 3 hours.
I have a surprise for you.
Okay, yeah, let's hear a surprise.
Okay, so have you seen the videos regarding the Maui fires, how the blue things
did
not catch fire and the way that the lasers are programmed? So I'm going to share my screen. Can you give me screen share?
Yep. Okay.
So Jeffrey Phillips, he's the guy, that anarchist who I did that show with on Market Anarchy.
Yep.
I'm guessing this is in LA. This Masonic Lodge was just painted blue. Did I be scared?
Right.
Same shade. That is the exact same shade as the Scientology Center, is it not?
It's exactly the same.
Which it leads me, and we can get into this in another show, as far as like why blue? Why the Blue Lodge? And blue isn't burning and
right. It's the Blue Lodge. Forgot about the Blue Lodge. Yes, the Blue Lodge for sure. Let me show you something. I'll give you a quick sneak peek of something else I'm going to talk about on the dump with Jeff tomorrow. Let me find, let's see, where is it? Okay. Here we go. This is a promo for the US Open. So the US Open is always a great place to watch what the propaganda is. Remember, the US Open started just this past Monday.
Oh,
right, and it'll end on the September 11th. Okay, here we go.
It's everywhere, every corner of the city. Blue is the color of summer, the color of champions. It's made in New York, confident, tenacious, a chance at greatness. A new era of tennis is here. And if you haven't felt the power of blue yet, you're about to. The US Open starts August 28th on ESPN.
And it ends, right? So Novak Djokovic will become, regardless of what happens the rest of the tournament, Novak Djokovic will become #1 in the world again on September 11th, right? Which is interesting that's a headline in the newspaper.
That's 22 years after, again, with those angel numbers.
22, right? Okay. So
and also Blue of Earth is on Aubrey Marcus's Arcadia speakers roster.
Blue is the color of Chernikov radiation, which is what they were seeing, what the observers are seeing there. So that is a particle that is moving faster than the speed of light. When you see it, it'll have this blue glow to it, right? I see them all the time. I see blue fucking lights everywhere. Okay. So they're harnessing the power. Everyone's attention is directed. Our directed energy weapons are looking at the color blue. They're having this whole thing with the US Open, the power of blue. Michelle Obama gives her speech. They're using this to push forward that it's probably doing a million things, right? But this would be like an energetic, one of those ideas that slips in below the conscious line about like blue is safe, blue is protective, blue is powerful, blue is blah, 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 blah. Like it would not shock me if sometime after the US Open, Michelle Obama steps into the fucking race.
Mm-hmm.
Harnessing the power of blue.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that is fascinating.
In my mind, at this point, I'm just hearing Blue Lodge, Blue Lodge, Blue Lodge.
100% Blue Lodge, right? If you want, safety is in the Blue Lodge, right? Or whatever it is. So, it's, you know, it's the hidden degree of Freemasonry, the 34th, the what's it called? The Cedars of Lebanon, you know, I don't know what the fuck is going on. The Flushing Meadows where the US Open is, like that's a key scene in Men in Black with the battle to save the world and all of that kind of stuff, right?
I'm sure that's just a coincidence.
Right. Right. So anyhow, but yeah, there's some blue stuff going on, but I didn't know that about that Freemasons Lodge. That's interesting. Where was that Freemasons Lodge?
I'm guessing LA.
But it would be interesting to know which one it was. I'd be interested to know if it's the Cedars of Lebanon building.
It looks like I'm guessing West Hollywood, Beverly, Melrose.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what it looks like as I'm looking at it.
Cedars of Lebanon is in the hood. No.
You know what? I'm just gonna ask on the thread, where is this? Oh, my keyboard batteries are dead.
Okay, I think we're done. I have a headache and I need food and water and stuff like that. So okay, yay, we did it.
Yay, we did it. And I also just saw as I navigated down, and so I navigated away from us and I click zoom to come back, exact same shade of blue.
Yeah. Okay, so we just put a show out a few days ago, so I'll probably hold this into next week and then we can do.
You want to stop recording while we discuss the.
That's a good idea. You don't need to hear our meeting. Bye, guys.